think this is everyone that's going to be coming, Sean.
Yeah.
And if not, then, they can
Folks
start
can
late.
file in.
Yeah.
I have no
but
problem
I
with that.
appreciate you all being here, and thank you so much for coming forward. The organization is Sean.
Thanks, Margie. Oh. Thank you all for coming out tonight, and thank you to the Circle Center and Margie and Allison and Ginger and Don and Donna and Sheena made the posters. Right?
It was Charlie.
Charlie. Thank you to Charlie for that. And thank you so much to all of you coming out tonight. I'm celebrating Colleen with this, but also celebrating the 10 years that we worked together as a pair of artists working in different genres, different mediums. The ups and downs, the foibles, all of the things of doing that. Thankfully, Colleen and I were both recovered alcoholics in recovery. That's where we met. We met around 2003, 2004, and we became friends, and we would go to dinner, we'd speak for each other at meetings, we'd go to out-of-town commitments. For about 10 or 11 years, in fact, at one point, we talked about moving platonically to Portland, Oregon together, because we both kind of felt like doing it. For a few reasons, it didn't happen. And so yeah, for quite a while, we knew each other. And one thing that kind of ran through those years that we knew each other, we consistently went to each other's art events. She had several art openings over that time. A couple of those at the time was when she was a sculptor, and primarily this metal art was from that period. And she would come to my readings at various places. At one point, I think I mentioned that in our statement, that I gave a reading at Bucks County Community College, and it was quite a ways from where we lived. And I look out in the audience, and Colleen was there, and we both kind of knew we should have been dating for a long time, but she was in a couple of other relationships, and she lived in New York for a while. And I always kind of thought, I like that girl. Then I saw her in a play during the Philadelphia Fringe Festival. Then I really liked her. And she, yeah. But somehow, we had other things going. And then, so, for this talk, I just, I'm not going to talk an enormous amount about the art. I'm going to read poems, and I'm going to talk kind of about the context of how all this came together and what Colleen created primarily in the last 10 years of her life, which the last 7 of it she knew was coming to an end. And that's a strange way to live. We tend to go through life, somehow it's built into us to never think we're going to die. But she lived for a long time. When she got her diagnosis of metastatic breast cancer in 2018, they told her that, on average, maybe 2 years. And she got about 7. And she did not want to waste that time. And so we did this stuff together. Anyhow, so, we became a couple in this enterprise. About the end of 2014, I got my knees replaced, and Colleen came and brought friends to visit me in the hospital. And then she brought AA meetings to my house. We packed people into my little living room in Germantown down in Philly. And then we started hanging out for a while. Then I started driving her home and walking her to her door, and it was getting increasingly awkward. Because we've been friends for a long time. And, what's happening here? And so on April 3rd of 2015, I took her to the Lantern Diner, and where that Silver Linings Playbook has that famous scene, and we sat in the booth next to where that scene was. And I told her I wanted to be more than friends, and she immediately thought, wait a minute, what's going on here? I thought you'd just be vague. And, you know, right 2 weeks before that is when she first got diagnosed with cancer. And, you know, I liked her. That didn't change what I felt and things. And pretty quickly we bought real estate 5 months after we started dating. We kind of knew we were just going to be together. It took us a little over a year to get married. We got married Quaker style. You know, you don't have an officiant, you just have 2 witnesses. And thank you to the Quakers in Philadelphia that enabled such a simple wedding. We had a friend who's a high-end wedding photographer who offered to do pictures for us for free. We said, oh, that would be great. And we thought about clothes and things, and we never did it. Colleen and I were both rather shy, private people. We have a hard time. That's why we didn't have a wedding. Neither of us could really think about getting a bunch of people together. Thankfully, we get over that. Recovery helps get over a lot of that. But I don't know. It was wonderful, the time we had together, and we worked things out with each other at times. We questioned each other, and we offered assistance when it was welcomed as we worked together. And in the last years, Colleen, she watched a lot of YouTube videos, a lot of them about art. She immersed herself in art, and she did that since she was a little kid. She went to a school called Project Learn down in Philadelphia, where they don't have grades, and you kind of, learn what you want to learn. And then she went to Kappa, the Performing Arts High School in Philadelphia, and then went to the Academy of Arts. And she loved it, and that's why I was so glad when we came up here. And she loved having the life drawing. She missed that so much. She'd been doing it since she was a little kid. She had to get forms signed so she could look at naked people and draw them when she was a little kid. And, she had a good progressive family that, you do things unconventionally. And we lived unconventionally in a lot of ways. And with that, I'm going to read poems that a little bit kind of celebrate the progression of this stuff. I have a whole lot of poetry about a whole lot of different things, but this is going to be mostly about us. And this first poem I wrote the first couple weeks we were dating, I think. And I had gotten out of my car. I was staying at her apartment most of the time. And I looked up the road. She lived just outside the Wissahickon Park in Philadelphia. And I saw a fox just kind of loping up the road. And at some point, it just suddenly turned and took off into the woods. And, as an art talk part of this, that's very often how poetry works. I need to live in a way where I'm attuned to be receptive to certain moments, and they become something. And so it's more of a lifestyle than being a writer or something. I think I've always felt that writing poetry is more akin to being a sculptor than a writer. And So this first poem's called A Sudden Turn. Thus began the paradigm shift, one love moving into another, slow heat of April rising, rain falling, one season, one comfort supplanted by another, stained gray, slightly, inexorably, by cancer they found in the underside of your breast. The next days, tender and compressed, cut, bruised, you through the afternoon, baking sweet potatoes, taking comfort with your cats. Evenings sprawled side by side in the living room, cars splashing by outside, hushing us into a light early slumber. I fell in love the way a fox in the open suddenly turns to find comfort in the darkness of the woods. Do whatever you want. In fact, I'd be reading this stuff if none of you were here. I've learned that I have a responsibility to put things out in the world as best I can. I'm very bad about doing it, but to me, the work itself is what sustains me and makes me happy. This is another poem that I wrote when we first started dating, probably within a month or two, and we were on a trip up to New Hope in Lambertville, and then north of there as well. There's a really cool hotel, I can't remember now. And we were on one of the walking bridges over the Delaware. It's called Two Stories. Standing on a bridge between two states, ourselves held close, trees still thin but filling in with new green of spring. The trees and the river tell one story. We listen closely for their words. It is the story of how we met, told in the shoreline where water held in a long cut of earth touches the banks and trees rise from both. A moment later, we look up to see the second story transpire. A cloud slowly traveling across the sky. Between cloud and sky, no beginning or end. We look back at the trees, and you tell me how much you love when shades of color are so close they can barely be told apart. The first story flows into the second, the trees and shore, the whole of the sky, and now you and I preparing for what the river brings. And here's a short poem that is on the poster for this stuff, I think. I'm just going to read it because I like it. And I wrote this when we lived in a weird little apartment in Alden Park in East Falls down in Philly. It was an old workers' quarters, and they rented it out real cheap to people. And it was a funky little apartment with a kitchen and a closet, basically. But it was also, it had these incredible windows, and it was like a little wing of its own. And it was a strange little apartment. And every night at midnight, I would hear the bells from my local church. It's nearby the Occidental Plain. An Occidental Plain is actually just a sycamore. Where we live, bells ring at midnight. I hear them peal through creeping vines that wrap our open bedroom window. In the dirt, some slight creature rasps. Cats at our feet adrift in a curl of torpor. You are asleep. Moonlight rests on your closed eyes. Outside, the crooked sycamore dreams of time and water and tangerines. I figured that's what sycamore would dream of. Something a little more exciting. So, I have a number of poems that, about us and about cancer and about these things. And that's not all I read, but this is one just from the first time Colleen shaved her head as chemo was starting up before she had metastatic disease. She was bald about 4 times. She did not like it. But, she liked it better than the ultimate. So this is called Pinch. When it comes time to shave your head, I shave mine first to test the old electric razor. I get in the clawfoot tub naked, bow and begin running the humming device through my hair, which falls in patches on the porcelain. You help get the back. We finish me. I scoop my hair into a pile. It is your turn now. We switch places. You start in. Sheaves of hair begin to darken the tub. At least there's the freedom and time saved in the shower, you say. Weeks pass, and tonight I shave again, having decided time for what's left of my hair is over. Before I start, I find between the razor's blade and the attachment a pinch of your hair that I set aside on a shelf. I lean over the sink and cut all that I can get to. When I am done, you take the razor and get all the places I missed. And this next poem, I've never really kind of quite known what to do with it. I wrote it, it's kind of about one really powerful thing that comes from the journey that Colleen was on. Is heightened awareness of what's going on around you, sensitive to just things in general. And this is a poem a bit about that, and it's called Sheen. This plane of existence is continually changing. New entities step in as others step out. Spoonfuls of soul served into squalling babies, tired souls eddying back to the great soul pool out yonder. I realized this during a late winter afternoon. Sky, that dull perfection between deeply overcast and hampered sunlight. There is enough light that a sheen appears on the back of your hand. Holding a magazine as you doze before dusk, head to foot in our bed in this peculiar manner we adopted some time ago, knowingly out of sync with conventional practice. I eye the loveliness of your hand, your face nearly concealed under your favorite hoodie. I imagine a clean bedsheet stretched between our hands in prelude to us folding it back into a compact eventuality. Each moment of my life to this point collects in this instance of the sun's silent reflection off the back of your relaxed hand, gathering both the sunlight and my astonished gaze. And break it up a little bit with another depressing poem. But it's not about us. But it's one that I wrote about a year before she died, and she helped me a lot with this poem. So that's what I wanted to read. And, this also just came out in the Asheville Poetry Review about a month ago. So someone else thinks it's a good poem. It's called A View of the Transport. And I wrote this after seeing this just astonishing photojournalist picture of this family on a boat with a coffin in the boat with them crossing a river in war-torn, probably somewhere we could guess. I can't remember though. It's called A View of the Transport. In this world, Charon is a young girl wearing a violet winter coat. She accompanies her dead brother across a turbulent river. What is left of her family crowds around his coffin. This is any river anywhere on earth cutting through war-scraped land. Nothing grows on the river's bank behind them. A remnant of a blown-out bridge stands on two columns in shallows of the choppy water. Twisted rebar and tattered banners hang from its end. An abandoned car and broken power pole, stripped of its lines, sit on the shore they have left from. Whatever coins they may have amongst them remain in their pockets. They don't have time to even consider waiting 100 years for his passage to the afterlife. They have taken this matter upon themselves, procured a small rowboat onto which they dragged a hastily painted 2x4 cross. The assembled passengers have a keen gaze on what waits for them on the near shore. His coffin is meticulously wrapped in a violet cloth and bow, the same violet that covers his sister's winter coat. And I wanted to read that because part of this exhibit contains roughly an expression of what Colleen did in capturing her family and friends and portraits. She did a few commissioned portraits. Here. So she was doing that stuff, and she was painting things that captured kind of the pains of infirmity, being sick. And she wanted to express the isolation and loneliness that come with that. And by expressing it helps get you out of it a little bit. And then, just some of her social related work. And she also has an enormous body of political work that will be another show one of these days, once I figure out all of that stuff. So like I mentioned, the prognosis was maybe 2 years on average, could be more. Thankfully it was. This is a poem I just wrote on the day of, it was May 8th, 2023, I guess. On the 5th anniversary of being told that your breast cancer had spread throughout your body. The specter of death came in spring and never left. Metastatic, everything static. Rapid decline, slow clawing back and back and back. We are blessed with bright new leaves, though. The specter never left. We live, we eat, we find joy in what we do not know. A little short poem before one long poem. I'm only going to read one long poem. I promise. This is called On a Day's Pause from the Rigors of Metastases. We walk through Laurel Hill Cemetery, you and I. I better get a drink before I do this. I hope I get through this reasonably well. Oh, by the way, this painting it's not mentioned in here. She has another painting there's a famous lion sculpture in Laurel Hill Cemetery. And this is probably the most famous sculpture in Laurel Hill Cemetery, an Alexander Calder sculpture that it is so strange. That's why I think it's well known, because people see it like, what the hell? Good stuff. We have returned to see the lion, his human-like fingers of stone gripping stone, where he sits above the river in the rain, high above us on a massive pedestal. Fall colors are muted now, but still beautiful against the gray. The river is rising. Bright, wet leaves stick to everything. Our current distance between the dead can be measured in the peculiar family names no longer heard of. The Herknesses, the Spanks, and Frinks. all folded into other nomenclatures, other families persisting. Colossal mausoleums anchor the familiar names: Elkins, Widener, Lippincott. The die is cast so early for some, there seems little variance even over time. Out over the river, I see no evidence of living things. What I think of living, movement over time. The river is moving faster and becoming muddier as it rises. Between headstones, we notice a flash of color, a red fox with sprays of white on his chest and tail, loping over wet grass between stones and monuments. He notices us, but has little concern. Our distance is insurmountable, and we do not matter. Like everything, he is dead and not dead, living and not living, as time only seems to move. The still air and the empty spaces inside the mausoleums do not support anything living. The illusion of death persists. If it is an illusion to the dead, it is real to the living, and not real, of course. I try to will my mind to images of those underground in various states of decay, but I cannot. That reality is unknowable. Biocentrism postulates that existence cannot become non-existence. The power of death has left you, and yet it is still with us. Last night we watched a fire on a large screen television, a beautiful fire at the base of a snowy mountain. Wind whipped flames higher, and we enjoyed it at a cellular level, something in us connecting to ancient advents of survival. We started noticing the points where the fire was revived, as it was digitally morphed to a return of the robust fire. The fire was neither real nor without bounds, endlessly looping for the hours it was created, and we consumed it with our eyes. And what do you make of the notion all this may just be a vast simulation? The possibility that all existence as we know it is something like a video game created by greater beings. Maybe we are simply dream factories firing up pre-programmed sequences of events. Just as the lion was created to honor a general whose life spanned 2 centuries and several wars in a time far removed from us and unfathomable. The lion, though stately and august, has fear in his eyes. The sculptor could not help himself. Try as he might to create a representative lion, he kept creating himself. The knuckles resembling exposed birch roots, his knuckles. The mouth articulating awe and terror, his mouth. The tense haunches, what he sees in his own legs. On our way back to the car, hidden under a holly tree, surrounded by a manicured hedge, we stumble across a remembrance in mosaic, tiny bright tiles assembled to create a map of this exact location. You might hardly notice it unless you just happen upon it, or already know from divine guidance it is here. We are walking past Millionaire's Row now. I imagine straight lines leading up to the mountains, well-planned grids of cities laid out in valleys all around the world, uniform roads, regulated development, routines and codicils. There is sense in the thoughts, order in the musings, civilization, even at arm's length, returning us to the rest of our lives. Okay. There is one other that's a little bit long, but it's half as long. So most of the rest, pretty short stuff. And here's another poem that Colleen, at one point, after we had moved up here, it was a nightmare to drive down to West Philly and go to Penn Hospital. After the 2-hour drive to drive in that madness, find that parking. So thankfully, Colleen asked about if she could, I had found out about an infusion center in Valley Forge, and she became the first person they let keep her oncologist down in Philly would go get treatment up in Valley Forge. And man, that made life easier, especially since we had to go down there a lot. But while we were there early on, she was getting these shots that they told her she needed to go walk for at least a half an hour after, otherwise they'd harden and cause problems. And thankfully, next to that infusion center is this beautiful long path that people bike on and stuff. And early on when we started walking it was in April, and we saw these people looking up in the sky, and we came to find that there's a heron rookery right there by the infusion center. And the first time we saw that, I came home and wrote this poem. Blue Heron. After the infusion suite in the chemotherapy wing at Valley Forge Hospital, we spend a little daylight on a paved path. Ahead, an older couple cranes wrinkled necks and aims black binoculars skyward. We look up and see nests lofted in treetops, elegant curved necks, sharp beaks well suited to kill. Slowly, a blue heron rises above mottled leaves. I think of the last helicopter leaving Saigon, clamoring people beckoning madly below as fast spinning blades appear to move gently backward as they cut into late April sky. And those indelible images, and one of those is that last helicopter leaving Saigon. And also as a kid, I always marveled at things like helicopter blades when they'd hit a certain speed and they look like they're barely moving, just because of. So this, we're starting to get close to the end of what we did. Yeah, it's on speed. April 8th, 2024 was the last eclipse, and we had a partial eclipse here, and a lot of our friends, a lot of folks were traveling to where they could go see the total eclipse. But we had some other things going on, and this was our experience. Outside the path of totality, we had things to do. You, an early PET scan, me, an appointment scheduled months ago. The forecast in Wilkes-Barre was for clouds anyway, and the clouds came. We didn't even plan to look up, didn't even know what time the event would occur. We came home in the afternoon. You shared with me the news was not good. Needing some air, we step into the backyard. It is darker than usual overcast. We look up and see clouds part for a few moments to reveal the moon partially blocking the sun. A brief interruption of one astronomical unit reminds us of totality. We hold each other and find the joy is greater than if we went and looked for it. One thing I'll warn you folks, well, thank you. Thank you. A few days ago, I kind of reopened Grieving Mourning. Things had scabbed over. And you feel like that's just simply healing or forgetting or a whole bunch of things. But then I went and revisited a couple of songs, a couple of things that I knew would get me. And I voluntarily went and revisited those things because I knew at times I need to reopen things. And I need to reopen them so they don't stay below the surface and come out as panic and anxiety. And so for the last couple of days, I've had a couple of long crying sessions, and it could happen again. I'm not saying that to apologize, but I think I told Chris that I'm going to try not to, for clarity's sake, not so much decor. Here's a little bit happier poem. This is about Colleen and I. One morning we were watching YouTube videos of poets, and she was fascinated by some things there. We were watching some videos about painting, and I wrote this. Undying. We are two such wonderfully imperfect souls, practicing our art, working to free grandiosity from its papered-over acts of misbegotten design and renovation. When we do our work, cats mosey in to partake and participate, for it has been known for millennia that cats are the great lovers of art. Childhood discoveries of self-awareness poke through like knitting needles assembling a scarf or sweater, mittens with their vast communal spaces where the four fingers intermingle and keep each other warm so they can practice their craft at home. My mother and grandmother, their arts of practicality died with them. I am here this morning laying down a few lines that will never enter the finite stream of commerce. Down with capitalism. Colleen, I don't know if she'd want me to tell this. She wasn't a big fan of capitalism. She sold her art on occasions, but she really enjoyed that in the last years she painted without any thought of whether something was saleable. And that was awesome. She actually died with about the money in the bank that it cost to cremate her. She broke even. And I think she would have loved that, personally. I mean, she was involved with, like, the Occupy stuff and stuff. She was a little radical. Cancer slowed her down, so that's why she stayed home and painted. Did what she could do. So here's another one that isn't about us, that she helped me with. And it was, I wrote this last November, right before she went to hospice. It's called Mantis Pool, and I'm getting close to the end here, just so you know. This was inspired by one of my favorite poets. It was a guy named Robert Francis, who was a contemporary of Robert Frost and not nearly as known, but I think should be more known personally. And Colleen and I, early on when we were dating, we drove to Amherst. We also went to Storm King Arts, which, if you've never been there, wonderful place to go. Massive sculpture garden, like 400 acres. It's huge sculptures. Well, we went to Amherst so she could buy some special clay that they only sell in Amherst or something. And I went there to visit Robert Francis's home, which is called Fort Juniper. He paid $1,500 to have the house built, and then he lived there for like the next 40 or 50 years on about $500 a year, eating soybeans that he grew outside and writing some of the most incredible minimalist poetry. I love Robert Francis. But anyhow, he had there's a video on the site about him at Amherst Library, and he talks about these mantises living in a juniper shrub. It's called Mantis Pool. And there's an epigraph from Francis. November seemed to haunt the place. It is past time for observations and judgments of the processes for survival. Summer did what it could with greens and blues. Mantises assembled in a juniper shrub, feigned supplication, exercised their natures, brutal and bloodless, with no calculation or art. Sometimes the best that can be done looks an awful lot like the worst. Let's stay inside, leave cleaning for spring. Windows will dirty anyway. Without effort, leaves will redden, fall, and gather wherever wind takes them. Winter, under its widespread haze, is best for waiting. And little did we know, Colleen would get sick a week or two later and be in the hospital up here before coming home for hospice. Now, there's just a couple of short poems after this. I was debating whether I want to read this, but I did send this out into the world a couple days after I wrote it, and it's actually going to have a soft launch in an anthology, a huge anthology from One Art Poetry. And online they're going to release the anthology on Labor Day, a couple days from now. When they when they wrote me to tell me that they had accepted this, I was like, what the hell, why did I send this out? But I did, so it'll be out. And then next year, it'll be out in an anthology from Penn State Press Library or something. To Colleen, for whom no elegy will suffice. It was the harshest winter in years. Another snowstorm encompassed us in our valley. The unrelenting season, nearly all pall and dirge. You were unconscious for days, slowly dying. I did all I could in keeping you comfortable. Rubbed your feet and legs, arms and hands, adjusted covers, swabbed your mouth and lips, applied cold compresses to keep fevers down. I filled pages of a notebook with meds given, bodily reactions, moments you tried to speak. Before the next doses of morphine and Ativan, I stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame, arms crossed, watching you breathe, your breaths labored then slow. When you died, the gray walls washed away and the room rose in a golden aura. So little was left. I gathered you in my arms, kissed your lips, your face, your closed eyes. I anticipated your body growing cold quickly, but warmth stayed a long time, passing into me each time I pulled you close. I held your hand that had gone cold. My warmth passed into you. It took hours for the hospice nurse to arrive, her travel hindered by the storm. I looked on as she undressed your body and prepared your skin with oils. Purple pools gathered in your back. Your skin clung to your joints, your thin extremities. The nurse dressed you in clothes I knew you liked. A man serving in place of Charon arrived in a black van. He carried your body out in a worn sling. I stayed with you every moment there was before he closed the doors and drove away, leaving me breathing in the dark, pillows of snow collecting on everything I could see. And I wanted to share that. It's part of it all. And I wanted it to not have a lot of artifice and a lot of simile, metaphor, things. But I still wanted it to be beautiful, and I wanted it to be a tribute to her. And it's not an analogy. It's not trying to pretty things up, but it's trying to share and express, a beautiful facet of life. Beautiful. Yeah. I'll follow it up with something a little happier. Amongst all the YouTube videos Colleen and I would watch, she loved the videos of animals that people would play music for, and the animals would respond. And I love them too. There's a whole bunch of them. And I wrote a poem just about that. It's called Across the Divide. If I were an elephant, would you play the piano for me? Would you ease my weariness with composed tenderness? If you play music for me, I will lift my laboring head to seek your gaze from the cauldron of dust that encompasses my eyes. I will slowly swing my wide trunk through the chasm between us. If I were a whale, would you play the violin for me? Would you dress in the deep blue shades of summer, your bare shoulders rising and dipping with the waves? If you play for me, I will breach the ocean and vocalize in kind, to remain in your memory like a moonrise in the desert. If I were a cow, would you bring a brass band to the edge of the pasture and loft a blend of notes into rarefied air to reach me? If you extend the effort for me in this afternoon haze, I will join all the others in crossing the field of temporality to assemble and face you in the divine space. And I'm going to finish. I was going to read this poem. I actually wrote this a long time ago. It's fitting. But it's on that wall over there. I'm going to finish with two poems, very short. One I wrote a couple weeks ago, and one I wrote yesterday morning. And they're a little bit about life now. First one is called Day. My mother is dead for years, so I licked the knife blade after buttering my toast. My wife died also. There are no voices to thoughts, no worldly order. Making breakfast for myself, 2 eggs, sausage, the birds gathered on the lawn, clearing their throats. That was a day. And then yesterday morning, like I said, I was opening doors again to grief. And I went and listened to a song that wasn't like a special song to us, but I knew how much it would relate to, what I'm feeling, what I experienced. And for some reason, I've been thinking about it for months. And yesterday, I went ahead and turned on the video of it with letters, so you can read along. And it was by the Waterboys in 1985. It's called "The Hole of the Moon." It's a beautiful song, and it just reminds me of so much. Colleen's passing, and about how much I admired her and loved her. So anyhow, after reading that, I sat in tears for like 5 minutes. Then I went, rinsed a dish, and looked at one of Colleen's plants that's starting to wilt a little bit. And I just wrote a little short poem. It's called Grounded, for Colleen. And there's an epigraph from the Hole of the Moon song. I spoke about wings, you just flew. Your plants are dying, though I try to remember to water them on occasion. You always believed that all plants would die under your care, until those last years you swept that belief through vigilance and a verdancy that spread throughout our home. Now I am bleeding my heart into a dim room full of memory. To say you left too soon cuts off all days I grieve you, your presence thick in the air. With that. Thank you, everyone. I on some level, I want to apologize for challenging stuff, but I believe that's all the beauty of art. And to be here in this room and to be with all of Colleen's work, a lot of which, when it's not here, is all over my walls. One day, a few months ago, I just started hanging her stuff everywhere. I won't always do that, things move, things change. But the beauty of this, and what I'm very just happy about, is Colleen left an incredible body of work. She left her soul. She left, her beliefs, her fascinations, her struggles. She left a remembrance of all of that. And she left it with me. And she left it with all of you that knew her. Miss her terribly. And with that, I'm done with anything. If anyone has any questions about things or any comments about things.
I have a question. When you read your poetry, I was wondering, when you're writing poems, do you speak them aloud at all, like while you're writing them, or when you're finished, do you speak them aloud?
I rarely do. Sometimes before reading, or every now and then I do read things out loud, but I read them in my head an enormous amount, and I apply my ear to, what I'm doing. And that's the thing. Those two poems, the last two poems I wrote. I told my friends in a poetry group I'm in, I wrote this one in 5 minutes. The first one I read, and like, you wrote it over a lot of years. And that's the thing. I've been doing this for 40 years now. And so a 5-minute poem is 40 years of preparation. And I write down that draft, and I wrote those two mainly because they're almost as I wrote them, just very minor tinkers with them both, and I think they're both finished and complete. And that's the thing is, you amass all of this stuff, and then there's flashes of the first one I wrote after I licked the butter knife. I have no idea why that was such a great crime in my mother, to lick a knife. But it was. It was uncouth. It was something. But now that's the thing. Everyone, people are with us, but we live our lives. And we go on with what we do. But yeah, that's interesting. And I don't, I haven't given readings much the past few years. That's why tonight was I was a little concerned. Is I'm giving a reading. That's usually just giving a reading. But tonight, I wanted to talk about Colleen. I wanted to talk about her art and how we did this together. I knew I couldn't really talk a lot about her art unless anyone has any questions. I often have a little backgrounds or insights at times. But yeah.
You talked a little bit in the poem, you talked a little bit about working together. And, I was just thinking about the question about reading your poems aloud and, having had Colleen, did you read to her your poems? Or
Yes.
So as an artist, I often ask, Marge or somebody, does this work? And how,
Oh yeah.
With your poetry, is that an important thing for you to do?
Not always. It all varies, piece by piece. That's part of why I read A View of the Transport. Colleen was a significant part of me revising that poem. The day I wrote it was just one of those things where this image is just incredible. I wish I had just, it was like an AP image or something. But the poem just lent itself. It just pulled together. But it was one that I spent a lot of time crafting, and Colleen was very helpful in certain things. She was actually a very good writer. She, didn't do a lot of it. There's that statement she wrote right before she died. And when she was younger, she wrote a lot of things, a lot of political things, and I have a bunch of things that I'm going to go through eventually. There are things to glean from. One thing, I'm looking to make a book of. I've got all these poems kind of about her and stuff, but it's not really a full-length book itself. But someone mentioned during the opening that this would make a good book, and I have a lot of it together now. We'll see what a hybrid thing can happen.
I just wanted to thank you for sharing your story because it was really touched our hearts. In your bio, it says that you've been writing for like nearly 40 years.
Yes.
And you're a pretty young man, so maybe you started as a child.
Well, I'm 62, so I started in my 20s. Actually, I told my mother when I was 6 I wanted to be a writer, and I don't have any recollection of
What was
that.
the response?
I don't recall if she told me about a response, but she did tell me that she thought it was an odd thing for a 6-year-old to say they wanted to be.
Yeah. So when you were a kid, did you have a daily journal or anything?
No. I was terrible at writing anything through my teens, and I wanted to be a fiction writer, and I took a class, and I would start to write a story, and I'd pore over every sentence, and I'd get about a page into it, and I didn't care anymore. And then I took a poetry class. I was fortunate to study with a very fine poet who, the semester I studied with her, she became like a world famous poet. And she was completely unknown when I was studying with her, and then all of a sudden she won the Pulitzer Prize.
Who was that?
It was Rita Dove.
Do you have like a daily practice?
Do I have a daily practice?
It's sort of like a cultivation practice because you don't know
The beauty of being a poet is I don't have to have discipline. Some poets might, but in fact, I always loved this. When I was in grad school, there was a bunch of poets. We were sitting around with a fiction writer, and he asked us, "What do you guys do with the other 23 and a half hours that day?" I love that. As a poet, I believe my practice is to follow the ducks around wherever they go. And the ducks, they're just wandering around. I'll wander around with them. And I wait for something to happen, like standing over my wife's ailing plants, and suddenly something sparks and lines start coming. And then it's my job to craft and sculpt them. In a sense, but yeah, I would love to have more of a daily practice. But when Colleen was alive, and then taking care of her mother for 6 months after she died, and my day job as a medical writer, editor, lexicographer, whatever it is, eats up too much time. But I am 62. It isn't going to happen forever. But yeah, ultimately, I think as a poet, unlike fiction writers I've known who have to have discipline, they have to sit for 5-6 hours a day and produce. And there's poets that view this as a thing, as a discipline and a craft. But to me, it is more living in such a manner that I am receptive to those moments that trigger something. And thankfully also, after doing this for a long time, it doesn't bother me at all if I go a month or two and nothing happens. When I was younger, that would be like, oh, geez, am I ever going to write anything ever again? Thousands of poems later, yeah, I'll probably write something else. We'll see.
Thank you so much for sharing it. I really
that is the weird thing. I mean, I kind of live without the discipline and I don't have much discipline about anything. I don't have much ambition either. I'm really kind of a lazy person. But uh-huh.
And I think what's beautiful about what you're doing right now, because people think, oh, poets, I'm a poet, but I'm not published, okay? So I think what's important to understand, you don't get up at 5 o'clock every day and write a poem. You know what I mean? Like fiction writers do that, but when you're a poet, you get up every day and maybe today you get one line or one word fascinates you or somebody says something. You know what I mean? Like somebody says something and that starts it. But like you're saying, it could be 40 years till you finish the thought, you know? And you have to accept that there's, that thought or that emotion may not develop today or tomorrow, you know?
That's the other thing. Yeah, it's there was this farmer in Iowa who kept a diary. He had put in an entry every day for I think 47 years, and he never wrote a single personal thing that I could ever find. At the time, I was in grad school, and my job was to go look at these things to see if there might be something worth publishing. And it was the most fascinating thing I've ever encountered. And I wanted to write about it, and it was 20-some years later when the writing group I was involved with was asked to write pieces in response to an abstract art exhibit. And suddenly the doors blew open, and I have like this 4-page poem about Elmer Box, the farmer, and it's a couple other things it's about, but it all kind of comes together. One of the most fascinating things is in the middle of going through these journals trying to find any life, but it's all planted this back 40 today, mended a halter, and then I came across the day where he went to a county fair, and she was there, and I was like, oh my God, where is this gonna go? And it went nowhere. And it was just fascinating. He was keeping a record of his life, what he did every day, not his thoughts or emotions or whatever. So, it was just a fascinating thing to encounter. And then to create something that resonated with people from experiencing that, it's kind of fascinating. The way if you're curious, the way the 47 years ended, there was a long entry from his son explaining how Elmer went to shovel the car out in snow, had a heart attack, and died in the snow. Fitting end for Elmer. Oh, that's a good question. I'm thinking 40s or 50s. Yeah, it's a while back. What's that? Yeah, he was a farmer. Certainly, in a sense, it is at once incredibly mystical and mystifying, and mundane, and as Elmer Box in that poem, I think had a line something about mundane as sausage links, something like that.
How did you and Colleen get to Wilkes-Barre?
Yeah, we were living in Philadelphia, and then we were living half the year in a cabin. The 5 months dating real estate purchase was a cabin in Jim Thorpe, and her mother was getting more and more infirm and blind and needed taken care of, and we couldn't do that in either of our houses in Philadelphia. And so we had to say goodbye to the cabin, and we bought a duplex up here because we started coming up here to Colleen. We came up to go to Michael's. But then, what really moved us here was when she discovered they had a hot yoga place in Edwardsville. So from the cabin, she was driving up like twice a week to go to hot yoga. Then we started looking at real estate because that's something we've always done together, and we did separately before we did it together. And yeah, found this duplex, bought it, was wonderfully surprised to find an incredible arts community up here and an incredible recovery community. And yeah, we were very, very happy that we found our way here. And yeah, she was quite opposed to the idea at first, until there was hot yoga. And kind of so.
I had conversations with Colleen about her cat. It was one of the first ones we had. And I was wondering how the cat is doing.
I hedged this because just today I had to clean up some more messes when I was trying to hurry over here. He's 14 or 15 years old, and he barks a lot. He's doing good. And they've adjusted to the fact that Colleen's mom is gone now, who brushed him all the time. They recognize that I'm their only option now. We have a good relationship. I brush him a lot more now. Yeah. It's kind of like Colleen, when we started dating, she had 3 cats. She had an 18-year-old cat named Isis. And it was hilarious because her and Isis didn't like each other. And, but that was, her job was to feed Isis, and Isis regarded that was Colleen's job. And there was a couple of cats that Isis liked. She didn't care for Colleen. She loved me for something. She would lay on my chest and sneeze in my face all the time. And yeah, it's interesting. My kids are all like, I can't believe you live with cats. Because I never disliked cats, but when I was a baby, I was allergic to them, so we never had cats. We had dogs, but I've come to accept a life with cats.
And they've accepted.
And they've accepted me. In fact, when I left, they were laying on the bed. When I tried to take a nap for a little bit, they came in there. So yeah. Anything else? If not,
Do you carry a little notebook with you or something to jot down lines?
I do, but I almost never use it. A little something. On rare occasions, if I'm away from, but that was another thing. I'd always forget things when I was younger, and I'd kick myself. Like, now I just know if it's going to be there, it's going to be there. It's not. When I get home, on occasions though, there is something that really strikes me, whatever, and I jot things down.
Do you do most of your writing in a notebook at home, or do you go online?
I do it in Word, almost exclusively. Yeah.
So you said that sometimes Colleen helped you rework or revise some of your work. Did you do the same for her, or did you need?
Yeah, she would ask, on occasion, she would ask. And I'm remembering the last year she was alive, there was one time when I guess I said something that wasn't solicited. It was not well received because Colleen was also fiercely autonomous and independent. And so it was an interesting balance, her letting me take care of her and her letting me into her art world. Because there were times when she would ask, particular things, but even then, I knew that, there's certainly no, I really think you should do this. It wasn't that.
Sean, you were given the award of poet laureate for Montgomery County.
It's an annual contest, and it started in around 2000. Bucks County has a longer one that started in the 70s or 80s or something. But this wonderful woman, a lot of folks in the poetry world in Pennsylvania know of, Joanne Levy. She started it up around 2000. And I was fortunate, the year I was picked, they had Grace Paley as the judge, who was much more known for prose. But it was fun meeting her. It was a while before she died. And I just remember she was just a tiny, little short woman. And we were getting a picture together, and I said, oh, maybe I should put my jacket on her. And she said, don't do that. Screw that. She was definitely not about formality and things. And yeah, I didn't talk to her too much. But it was Grace Paley, for God's sake. Iconic woman. Yeah, but so yeah, that was a fun year. I did a bunch of readings, a lot of places, and yeah, that was nice. Yeah. Thank you. That's a good place to. If anyone wants to check things out for how long will we stay open? For a few minutes or?
How many of you